That Time I Got Reincarnated as a Slime, Volume 11. Prologue. A golden depression. A white manor. A garden lined with colorful blossoms. The young girl's smile, and a boy watching over her. It was a vivid, unfaded memory of happier times, and he wished to gain that happiness back. But it was difficult. He built a manor, a city of gold, with a beautiful garden that seemed to recreate the paradise of heaven up above. It was even more splendorous, even more impressive than what his memories told him. But no matter where he looked, he just couldn't find the final piece of the puzzle. Even with his power, enough force to become one of the great pillars supporting the entire world, he was unable to get his beloved girl back. If she couldn't be found, the smile would never return to his face. He had, after all, established all of this for the sake of that one young girl. His name was Leon Cromwell, a demon lord known as the Platinum Saber. And the name of the girl he searched for. At the throne room of the vast, spiraling palace looming in the center of the golden land of El Dorado that he ruled over, Leon exuded as much military might as he could at the three suspicious-looking characters taking a knee before him. They were dressed unusually, all black clothing with large, umbrella-like hats to match the weapons merchant Damrada. It went without saying that it was Laplace and his cohorts. You, then? This is the second time, is it not? Yes, my lord. It remains a great honor and a joy to have made your acquaintance. However, we regret to inform you that we cannot honor the request for the certain classified materials included this order. It was Tyr who responded, looking suitably composed. They had the lone woman in the group handle negotiations, hoping to give the demon lord the best impression possible. That, however, would come to an end today. Now they would follow the plan Yuki devised and halt activity in the Western nations for the time being. Misha, one of the leaders of Cerberus, would take over as the main contact point with the Rotso family, continuing regular business, as Yuki's team moved operations over to the Eastern Empire. What's more, with the loss of Maribel, the power of the Rotso family itself had taken a major hit. The kingdom of Celtrotso was the main point of procurement for the classified goods mentioned, and right now, it was unlikely the Rotsos had the force remaining to perform the stable summoning ceremonies that were required. Plus, Tempest had now joined the Council of the West, which essentially meant the Western nations were now under the influence of the demon lord Rimuru. There would be more eyes on them than ever before. Everyone agreed that now was the best time to pull out. Oh, a rather bold thing to say. I see you're wasting no time demanding more money, unlike Damrada. No, Lord Leon. It is nothing like that. As you know, the demon lord Rimuru is attaining a prominent position within the Western nations. He appears to frown on the summoning of otherworlders, and he strictly prohibits it. Thus, we have come to the painful conclusion that it will be difficult to continue defying his will. Listening to Tyr's brisk reply, all Leon could think was, I knew it. He had received similar reports from his plants in the Western nations. He was fully aware this was just a matter of time. Besides, this approach really had too many unknowns to it. In fact, the chances of success were astronomically low. It would have been foolhardy to expect success from the start. He was, after all, being far too specific with the type of summons he wanted. He had sent orders to his team, having them perform summonings on multiple occasions. Over 30 summoners aided in the effort, and it took 7 whole days to ensure that every required condition of Leon's was fulfilled when conducting the ritual. But it still worked less than 1% of the time, and since the same people couldn't be involved in another summoning immediately afterward, they had only so many tries. Their chances were close to 0 from the start. Leon himself had conducted a few summonings, but every one of them failed. His last success produced Shizu Aizawa, and 66 years had passed since then. The more you narrowed down the conditions, the longer the interval required between each attempt, and there wasn't much reason to expect the next summoning to work, either. So he came up with the idea to perform incomplete summonings they could attempt with more frequency. The person Leon was looking for was still a young girl, so an incomplete summoning that resulted in a young child would boost their chances, no matter how slimly. So his project spread across the Western nations, as he engineered as many attempts as possible to collect as many children as possible. And now it had all come crashing down. There was no other way, and there was no new great idea to explore. Leon found himself burning with an intense impatience, but still he kept his voice cool as he spoke. Rimuru? We have no treaty signed with the West, and I've made no request for cooperation. We were interfered with in the end, but that's all in the past now. But why are you shutting off business with me? If the West is beyond our grasp, there's always the East. Leon's penetrating voice echoed across the throne room. The powerful coercion that filled every syllable was like a point-blank attack at Tyr, whose body froze. He was simply on another level. Your average magic-born couldn't even bear standing before a demon lord, and even a strong, high-level one like Tyr had trouble dealing with Leon. But Tyr wasn't alone. Allow me to explain that matter, my lord. To tell you the truth, things are starting to get a little suspicious over in the East as well. It looks like they're trying to prepare for war on the sly over there, so apparently there aren't any sorcerers free enough to take up the work. It'll be hard to find the personnel we need. Leon squinted at Laplace. Deep down, this annoyed him. He cared very little for what became of the West and East, but a dragged-out war would impact his own mission. He thought it seemed that he would need to reconsider his direction from the bottom up. But he didn't betray this on his face, his expression as cold as ever as he continued staring at Laplace. Facing the full brunt of it, Laplace grew uncomfortable. This sure is bad news. The fake demon lord I killed was nothing compared with this guy, ain't nothing like the real thing, and all that. Maybe the boss is right. Trying to exact revenge from him directly might not be such a hot idea. Yuki had ordered him to refrain from any under-the-table dealings for now. Even with the very man who killed Kazalim right here in front of him, Laplace had no intention of doing anything to Leon. He wanted to live up to Yuki's trust, so the only thing on his mind was carrying out his work. Still, if your sworn enemy is in front of you, of course you're going to gauge your chances a little. And as he evaluated his opponent's power, seeking out any small weakness he could find, he concluded that the demon lord Leon truly was a monster. If they got into an actual fight, he couldn't say what would happen. Maybe he'd win, maybe he'd lose. Even if his cohorts Tyr and Footman joined him, there was no guarantee they'd emerge victorious. So Laplace was treating this visit as strictly work-related. But as he did, he correctly understood why Yuki had assigned this job to them. The boss wanted us to see this guy for ourselves, no doubt. Know thy enemy, and all that. Hell, even the boss said he'd have trouble with Maribel if they went toe-to-toe. She only messed up 'cause Rimuru was more of a monster than she thought. Course, trying to gauge that guy's strength is a real tall order. Maribel's fatal error had been misjudging Rimuru's strength. The fact that someone like her, a born talent when it came to schemes and strategy, decided to directly engage her target was a blunder in itself. Laplace thought so, and so did Yuki and Kagali. What could she have been thinking? What did she fear? As a third party, it was hard to imagine what had made Maribel decide this was a war of attrition and to try to end things quickly, no matter how disadvantageous that was. Besides, it was Yuki himself, in the end, who had guided Maribel toward that line of thinking. Maribel certainly overestimated her strength, there was no debate over that, but Yuki was the one who planted the idea in Maribel's mind that she had a fighting chance against Rimuru. Weaving together a web of false information, he had successfully put all her plans out of order. Not even Yuki thought for sure that Maribel would lose, of course. His goal was to pit these two forces against each other and gauge their abilities. It ended up with the demon lord Rimuru winning, Maribel, a thorn in Yuki's side as well, dying, and Yuki himself becoming the new master of her unique skill Avarice. That was what he really wanted, as much as it stunned Laplace into silence once he heard about it. You couldn't really aim for someone else's skills like that, but as Yuki put it, he had a hunch it would work. It's crazy. Just completely mad. Maribel's luck failed her, to be sure, Once it became so clear she was talking up her prowess too much with the boss. Nothing can beat the power of information, in the end. And that's true for Leon, too. I hate to say it, but unless I'm sure I've got the upper hand, staying hands off with Im's the wiser choice here. Such was his conclusion, so they decided to halt their plans and focus on expanding their influence and gathering intel. Those objectives hadn't changed, and now that Yuki's goal was realized, they had no reason to stick around in the Western nations. Now they were trying to wriggle out of their dealings with Leon without making him blow his top. Laplace couldn't let himself falter against the pressure of Leon's gaze upon him. He distracted himself by talking some more. Now, mind you, this ain't the end of our dealings forever, my lord. We'll contact you again once the coast is clear, so to speak, for summonings. We're just looking for a little more time until then. And remember, we have a network spanning the globe, so if any kids wind up in this world in the meantime, we can scoop 'em right up for you. Well, our hands are tied on that front. I will leave that matter to you, then. But I do have one question. What would that be, my lord? Why are you so loose-tongued? Laplace gave Leon's question a befuddled stare. He had no idea where or when he might have misspoken. Did I screw something up? Ah well. If he's willing to continue working with us, then let's keep this party going. It didn't faze him much. In his mind, life had to be enjoyed to be worth living. Even if he made a mistake, as far as he cared, that was then and this was now. Resisting the urge to lunge at Leon, Laplace quickly made up his mind on the matter as Leon spoke. Is it really right for merchants, so keenly aware of their self-interests, to speak so loosely of affairs such as war? If Damrada were here, I don't think he'd do anything quite so foolish. That. He had a point. But Laplace still felt in the right. Yuki had ordered him to make that statement, and he told him about something else, too. Recalling it, Laplace could feel all the pieces falling into place in his mind. The next thing Leon was likely to say was, "What are you hiding? You seem to want to point my eyes toward the war, but you will have to try better than that." The question was exactly what Yuki predicted. It put Laplace at ease, even as it exasperated him. There's just no dealin' with him, is there? The boss knew full well that the conversation would turn out this way. Leon, reading Laplace's words too deeply, surmised that he was hiding something. A demon lord like him, who correctly knew the value of information, mistakenly thought this was a scheme to distract him from some other goal. But it wasn't. Laplace and his friends were just doing what Yuki told them to. There wasn't any deep thinking behind it. It was a simple fact, but one there was no point in telling Leon. He'd just assumed that Laplace was making futile excuses. This was all the work of Yuki, who wasn't even in the room, and there had to be some meaning to it. And of course, Laplace had some hints. Ah yes, Lord Leon, you're a shrewd character, indeed. To tell you the truth, this really is the end for the confidential goods for now, but we actually still have 5 at a certain location. These were the kids that Shizu Aizawa intervened with and took care of. Yuki had wanted to leak word of the children in Rimuru's care to Leon from the start. But if his team simply blurted it out, Leon might assume there was some ulterior motive behind it. That's why he waited until the end of their chat to instruct them to save the children. His uncanny ability to predict a conversation, something that could potentially flow in any direction, was one reason why Yuki was such a fearsome presence. It even scared Laplace a bit as he continued following Yuki's instructions. There are 3 boys and 2 girls, you see, all otherworlders. The problem is their location. It's a spot that we don't have access to. Shizu Aizawa. Shizu, is it? And this place is Tempest, is it not? You got it. I hate to disappoint, let me tell you, but we're all merchants here. We don't want to expose ourselves to too much danger. By the way, their names are Ken Miser, Yoshiki, Gail Gibbs, Allison, and Scoey Colbert. Before Laplace could recall the names, Footman, silent until now, barked them out. Yuki, picturing footman as unsuited for negotiation, had only asked him to memorize that name list. Yes, those are the ones. Not that you'd have much interest in unavailable goods, my lord. Laplace smiled. Leon, meanwhile, frowned peevishly. Your diction leaves much to be desired. Are you sure it was Scoey, and not something more like Chloe? Footman gave the irritated question no answer. Any further prodding, and Leon's anger might develop into all-out belligerence. Footman, after all, was in the most danger out of anyone in this room. Normally, it would have been smarter to not say anything, but despite riling Leon up, it wasn't the wrong move to make. Excuse him, Lord Leon, Tyr said. The names of otherworlders are always difficult to transliterate into our languages, so they're likely not completely accurate. But if I may, I was told that the names aren't important regardless. She bowed, and Laplace and Footman followed suit in vaguely comic fashion. Indeed, the names don't matter. I pin the blame for losing these goods on you, but it's not enough to count as violating our terms. I will accept your intelligence about an upcoming war as ample apology. Swallowing assorted emotions, Leon maintained a cool composure, and with that, the meeting came to a close. Laplace accepted the money for the goods provided, and he and his cohorts put El Dorado behind them. Well, what to make of that? Leon whispered after they left. His long hair tied back in a ponytail shone a beautiful gold color, a stark juxtaposition to the gloominess of his long eyes. Standing at attention next to him was Arlos, the Silver Knight, his advisor and one of his closest confidants. Should we do away with those three? If they've upset you, Lord Leon, I see little value in keeping them alive. Leon scrutinized Arlos's words. Compared with Damrida before, this trio had acted very suspiciously. He wondered how they and Damrida could even share a profession. Leon barely trusted merchant types to begin with, but he also wanted to avoid conflict with the Cerberus organization. He may have had his agents planted across human society, but compared with that massive group, based in the East, expanding its influence in the West, it wasn't even a competition. So he coldly decided that he'd use them while they were useful. In particular, he believed that humans were better suited than monsters for rooting out otherworlders. If he wanted to reach his goal, Leon required human help. Let them be. I'm more concerned about the information they had for us. If the Eastern Empire is truly about to mobilize, we could very well have a world war on our hands. I don't know how the other demon lords will react, but I hardly want us pulled into worldwide chaos. Indeed, my lord. All of El Dorado shines under the light of your authority, but I can easily imagine large-scale conflicts across many other lands. We must be prepared for that. Arlos nodded at Leon's reply. El Dorado, the land Leon ruled over, was on a continent of its own, separated by ocean from the rest of the world. In Earth standards, it was larger than Australia, and every inch of it was Leon's domain. A gigantic active volcano was perched in the middle, constantly erupting the whole year through, but the ash it spewed was carried away by magically conjured wind, never falling on the beautiful central city. Nearby, the volcano had laid a vast variety of ore deposits, which were worked into assorted types of magical metals. The gold ore veins found there produced so much precious metal that Leon was secretly dealing some of it to human civilization. The city was the pinnacle of glory, the crown jewel of a kingdom protected by magic. That was how Leon pictured his golden land of El Dorado, and not only Arlos, but everyone else who lived on this land would want nothing less than to be dragged into some ugly human war. I will have some emergency defensive magic readied for deployment, and I will put our security protocols at their highest level. Yes, if you could, please. But things never work out the way you want, do they? What do you mean, my lord? I mean war. If enough people die in one, it could awaken some creatures that would trouble all of us terribly. I know June, the original Yellow, is slumbering in this land somewhere. I doubt she's taken physical form yet, but... Leon groaned. It was all so ridiculous. What was the Eastern Empire thinking? He didn't know, but any war naturally involved a lot of death. The more blood that was shed, the more the monsters exposed to it would be energized. In the worst case, it could awaken one or more dangerous demons, a true calamity for humankind. Leon, with his unique background as a former hero, knew exactly how foolish that was. Of course, as a demon lord, this was just him being sentimental. While it saddened him to see, no matter what sort of misfortune all those unknown faces witnessed, he wouldn't lose a wink of sleep over it. No, Leon's concern was about a far less likely possibility. What if, by some chance, this harms the very girl he's looking for? If that time should arrive, let us show the full force of our powers. Yes. I look forward to seeing that. Also, allow me to deploy a few Azure Knights to their nation as well. Leon and Arlos placidly nodded at each other. No need for detailed orders. Arlos had a gift for reading Leon's intentions and putting them into action. Make it so, Leon said as he closed his eyes. Then, in that now empty chamber, he opened them again and stared into space. Scoey Colbert, though. I know I shouldn't expect too much, but that's almost too close to her name. Even if it's a trap, I can't ignore it. Whether it was a trap didn't matter. The Demon Lord Leon's ultimate goal was to find her, his childhood friend, and the girl he had to protect. That girl's name was Chloe Orbert. Chapter 1. Observation, Research, Results. In one corner of an opulent mansion, a shady-looking group was relaxing on sofas surrounding a table. The site was a base used by the Cerberus secret society in the West, run by Misha the Lover, one of the group's bosses. The woman attending to Misha provided tea for the guests, bowed, and left the room. That was the signal for the conference to begin. I see. It went well, then? Listening to the report, Yuki Kagarazaka smiled broadly. He went exactly the way you said he would, boss. And I thought for sure Laplace messed it up at first. Ho ho ho. Laplace is a careful man, but he's not a born negotiator, after all. Whoa, hang on. I'm better than any of you guys. Tyr and Footman only seemed to be on the same page when they were picking on Laplace. He complained loudly about it but wasn't truly offended. It was just some friendly banter. Well, it all worked out, didn't it? I'm just glad you managed to keep your cool with Leon right in front of you. Yeah. 'Cause honestly, I half expected you'd resort to violence in there. If it did, all it meant was cutting off ties with the Demon Lord Leon. Now that they had decided to lay off the Western nations for a while, Yuki laughed the concept off as no great shakes. He was a terrible man, I tell ya, the dejected-looking Laplace said. But why'd you have me tell him about the kids anyway? Yuki shot him a half grin. Oh, it's nothing, really. Leon's trying to collect incomplete kids, and I'm all but certain that so he can expand his fighting power, but part of me wondered if there's something else behind it, you know? Ah. So you wanted to reveal to him that the Demon Lord Rimuru has 5 of them? Not just that. We can still only guess at how Leon's treating these kids, you know. Rimuru saved them by showing them how to handle spiritual force, but Leon doesn't know about any of that. So I was interested to see how he'd react to these children he thinks are doomed to die pretty soon. I see. That is a curious question, yes. And depending on his reaction, we can try predicting his next move. Right. For now, we've got nothing. We needed to jolt him a little, I suppose. Yeah, you see? I mean, it was more out of curiosity than anything, though. That's just how I am. I sweat the small stuff. Kagali and Laplace could appreciate that. As Yuki said, he was worrying himself too much about this, but if they wanted to peer into Leon's intentions, that piece of info was a useful way to do it. What if the Demon Lord Leon took action? He wasn't rash enough to take on Rimuru just to gain 5 more fighters for his side. The risk of riling him far outweighed the potential boost to his forces. Leon was smart enough to see that. Normally, then, he'd let these children be, but what if he didn't? If he didn't, it meant Leon had some other goal in mind. However, Kagali said, I doubt Leon would do anything drastic just for the sake of a few children. You don't think? 'Cause I leaked info on that war and got nothing but funny looks for it. Was I wasting my time? It would have been pretty interesting if Leon made a move, but the chances of that were low. Cagali and Laplace saw the wit of Yuki's idea, but both assumed that it wouldn't amount to much. All Yuki could do in response was grin at them. Yeah, like I said, I'm sorry. But unless you massaged it like that, it would have been weird if you just talked about the kids out of nowhere. If you started with that, then with your acting skills, I dunno. He paused. But his intentions came across well enough to the group. I hate to say it, but it's true. Footman's too tongue-tied and short-tempered, Laplace is shallow and fishy-looking, and I alone could never have pulled it off. Tia, acting entirely blameless, made Laplace roll his eyes and Footman sneer at her. This, too, was often how their conversations went. But then Tia seemed to recall something. Maybe I'm overthinking it like you said, boss, but there's something that bothered me a little, too. Oh? What's that? Well, when Footman rattled off the list of goods, Leon was all. Leon? He asked about the names again. When Footman said Scoey Colbert, he replied along the lines of, "Are you sure it's Scoey and not Chloe?" If he claimed that the names didn't matter, I don't see why he would even care, but... he's just high-strung like that, you know? He fusses over the details. Ho ho ho. So irritating, isn't it? Maybe he was just poking some fun at my pronunciation. Laplace and Footman saw no major concern. Yuki and Cagali, meanwhile, exchanged looks. What do you think? I doubt he would have reacted if he truly didn't care. Yeah, but really, there's no way he... That's just too much of a coincidence, isn't it? Well, if it's fate we're dealing with, there's no such thing as never, you know. So you think he really? It would indicate to me that yes, the Demon Lord Leon's primary goal is that girl Chloe. Seriously? Yuki looked stunned. If that possibility was correct, it meant they had just inadvertently tossed away their upper hand against Leon. Cagali, meanwhile, was even more frustrated. The anger was written all over her face. If that was Leon's goal all along, then her comrade Clayman wouldn't have had to be killed. Huh? Tia couldn't hide her surprise at the unexpected possibilities that sprung from her observation. But it was the cold, heartless truth. Are you kidding me? Is that what you really think? Yuki and Cagali were born schemers, that much was true, but not even they had insight into everything. They always thought 2 or 3 steps ahead, ensuring they could handle any situation that arose after failure. Laplace knew that well, but even he thought they were overreacting this time, and Footman solemnly nodded his agreement. Well, it's still just a possibility. Not one we can afford to ignore, but nothing set in stone yet. So your curiosity didn't cost us anything after all, huh, boss? Cost? Hell, it might have earned us a hell of a lot. Right. I don't want to expect too much, but if things turn out that way, wouldn't it be pretty fun? And if we work things right, we could use this to pit a couple of annoying demon lords against each other. That's a win-win on our end, I'd say. Yeah. It's not like it matters to us who wins in that case. Let's just frame this as more fun in the wings. Ho ho ho. I still think we're overreacting, but it's no harm done. Well, no need to go overboard on the expectations. It's not like everything's gonna go the way we want it, you know? Laplace, sensing everyone relaxing a bit on the issue, attempted to sum matters up. Once the group nodded in understanding, it was time to move on to a different subject. Misha called for her attendant and got another round of tea going. So how about you update us on your stuff, boss? Laplace asked after a brief break. Yeah. I'm concerned about the Chloe thing, but we can focus more on that later. Let's move on to the main topic. Yuki nodded at Laplace and took a sip. Then he smiled and went over the fruits of his negotiations. While Laplace and his cohorts were dealing with Leon, Yuki's side was involved in high-level talks of their own, with the shadowy figure that ran the Western nations. The topic, how to clean up after the whole Maribel affair. As you all know, the cover story is that I was under Maribel's control, so she's taking the entire blame for this. Ah, and now you're working to back up that story? Exactly. I mean, if I was under her thrall, I couldn't really head out to the Eastern Empire, could I? No, you're right. Yeah. I thought that was kind of off, too. Regarding this avarice power, it was a toss-up whether I'd be able to grab it from her. More than that, my main aim was just to get Maribel killed. After she was, I'd be free to move around again. So once I firmed up that position for myself, I thought it was time to negotiate with the venerable Granville Rotso. Yuki's sights had been aimed squarely at Maribel. He needed to distract her so he didn't completely lose his position in the West, and eventually, that distraction led to her death. With her out of the picture, Yuki had his free will back, and anything nefarious he did before could be framed as Maribel's orders, and it worked. Maribel was gone, and Yuki had obtained powers far beyond what he expected. The negotiations went similarly well, and what he heard there was the main reason why Yuki called for this meeting. So if you don't mind me starting at the conclusion, we have one more job to do before we head east. He glanced at the surprised faces surrounding him, trying to look serious. Got that? Now let me give you all the details, start to finish. With that, Yuki began describing his conference with Granville. We were at peace. And in Rimuru, the capital of Tempest, every day was packed for me. Once things calmed down a bit, I sent out another ruins expedition team, but they didn't find a body or anything. Either Yuki was telling the truth, and she blew herself up, or he'd done something with her. Regardless, any issues stemming from this incident had already been swept away. Maribel was a princess of the kingdom of Seltrozzo, but spreading word that she attacked us in the ruins would just aggravate the situation, so I contacted Seltrozzo on the sly and had them chalk it up as an accident, something made possible by our mutual desires to keep it from becoming a big thing. Once you're an old enough royal family, accidents are just part of the package, so our arrangements went pretty smoothly. Still, their king and queen just seemed so emotionless to me. Under those parents, I could see why she relied on her knowledge from her past life so much. Had Maribel gotten to enjoy a normal, innocent childhood in her new life, would things have turned out differently? I couldn't help but wonder, as much of a what-if thing that was. And that brings me to the 5 elders. Granville Rotso, eldest of them all, boss of the Rotso family, was the real puppet master pulling Maribel's strings. I'd been steeling myself for some kind of retribution toward us, but there had been nothing. Perhaps they were admitting they were up to some no-good antics and decided not to respond as long as we kept our mouths shut. It had been over a month, actually, and Granville had kept mum, and that was more than enough time for our needs, too. Taking advantage of CI's information and grasping the goings-on in the Western nations underground, we were now sure there was no greater threat over there than the Rotsos. We did pick up on a few groups of interest, along the same lines as the Sons of the Veldt, that mercenary team, but it wasn't clear whether any of them shared in our interests. If they were clearly hostile, that was another matter, but we had no reason to rile them. I didn't want to go prodding any hornets' nests I didn't have to, so I decided to just keep tabs on their movements. We were on good terms with the Free Guild and enjoyed the backing of the Western Holy Church. Really, I don't think any organization was big enough by now to pick a fight with us. It was only natural, then, that Tempest was now leading the largest faction in the Council of the West. At the start of another peaceful afternoon, we were holding our regular cabinet meeting. In what amounted to the blink of an eye, our nation had all but taken the place of the 5 elders, and maybe that's why we had this pile of new issues to deal with. The Council of the West, after all, played an enormous role in establishing consensus among the Western nations. Councillors voted on measures to enact, which basically meant that the more councillors you sent, the more of a say you had. Now that I had at least some goods on every nation in there, though, the group's members looked upon our representatives as mediators of sorts. Our rising influence in the West thus meant the number of complaints and petitions sent our way was skyrocketing. Talk is cheap, of course, and apparently a lot of people were taking advantage of the bargain to push their pet projects. This is exactly why world domination is such a stupid idea. I don't think you get a single chance to take it easy if you're in a ruling position. Now I understood why the other demon lords didn't seem to care much about lands outside their boundaries. If you wind up inadvertently taking over some destitute area or another, you're obligated to address whatever people are dissatisfied about there. People talk about eliminating disparities like it's easy, but from the eyes of the one doing it, it never went that way. The right way, I imagine, is to take that region's assets, their labor, their resources, cover the expenses, and redistribute the resulting profits. You want to be careful with siphoning in wealth from other regions, because you might start to have real inequality on your hands then. Now that our nation led the largest faction, the other nations were looking for payback. We can shut them out for now, but before very long, we're bound to have an opposition on our hands. The question now became who we'd send to the council as our permanent representative. We needed someone smart, sociable, and possessing a certain amount of charisma. Ideally, someone with the force to talk someone into submission, but also, sorry, but I'm out. With this sort of thing, the first person to speak up wins. I will admit to having the gift of gab, but I had zero intention of taking on more trouble for myself. I'm not sure I can, either, Benimaru said right after me. The previous council meeting taught me all too well that I don't have the stomach for those mind games. In a battlefield with no physical combat allowed, I'm as good as useless. I felt he was being a bit modest, but he likely meant most of it. Benimaru certainly would have trouble against all those sly old nobles. My mission is intelligence gathering. I cannot afford to leave my position as Raimuru's eyes. CI was out, too. That much I expected. I didn't want to lose him, either. Geld bowed out as well. He had common sense, and I knew I could rely on him, but I had left a mountain of important work in his hands. Our construction schedule was packed, and he definitely didn't have the time to take on more. I thought Geld would be a fine counselor, but I would have to eliminate that choice for the time being. Which left? Me. I passed a quick glance at Gable, quietly taking in the proceedings up to now. Gable, surprisingly enough, was a pretty sensible person, and I could, maybe see him shining in this important post. Well, all right, there was a lot to be anxious about with him. But there was really no one else. Hakuro was my military advisor, charged with building up our soldiers. Shuna could be trusted for the job, but if she left for that, it'd impact work around our own nation. Rigard and the other goblin elders were off the list for similar reasons. We had tons of thorny issues to tackle, a legal system for our new nation, negotiations with other countries, managing our growing population, and much more. They were taking the lead on all those issues, and if Shuna or Rigard departed, it could grind the whole thing to a halt. We were training a new generation of leaders, yes, but I wanted to see them grow some more first. I am in the midst of a project to capture and bring back wyverns to train as mounts to improve our air offense. It requires the extensive use of a great number of types of potions, so I would like to continue recording data for this project. Yes. There was no doubting that Gable was the right lizard man for the job. It seemed better to let him nurture our budding wyvern force than send him off to the council against his will. All right. Gable, keep up your current work. Yes, sir. Understood, sir. Gable was visibly relieved. I didn't want to force him into anything, so this, I thought, was fine. Maybe I've wound up expanding our forces in too much of a hurry. It was a poor idea to spread my hand out when I didn't have enough trained personnel, but the workload just kept on rising. It was a problem, but let's see if there are any other choices. And just as I thought that, my eyes settled on Shion. She was staring at me, all a sparkle. Sir Raimaru, I denied. I reflexively cut her off. She was volunteering, I assumed, but she was out of the question. "Why?" she asked, surprised. The question itself was also a surprise to me. "Let's just pretend, for a moment, that you were a counselor. And let's say there's some pudgy, leering elderly man in front of you. Another counselor, and now this counselor's placed his hand on your shoulder, all friendly like. How would you handle that?" It's obvious. I would grab the man's neck with my left hand, lift him up, and punch and punch and punch. Bzzzzzt. Hence why she wasn't in the running. Shion's grown, I'll admit. I had no doubt about that, but there were still a lot of situations that made me anxious with her. Like before, for example. I found Shion in the dining hall. She gave me a big smile and presented the dish in her hand. "So Rimuru, I've been waiting for you. I finally made a cake all by myself. Here you go. It tastes the same as Lady Shuna's cooking, with several times the quantity. Please, go ahead and try it." I was already regretting this. But Shion was proving to be a capable tea brewer, and that must have put me off guard. Thanks. Appreciate it." Unconsciously, I accepted it. That was a mistake. A large block of something resembling opaque jello was on the plate. My face fell. "Ah, this is cake?" Staring at this object, I looked around for assistance, but nobody was there. Did they all escape? No, Gobichi was at his post, sprawled out on the kitchen floor. So there's one victim. I now realized I had visited the dining hall at the worst moment possible. But it was too late. "Hey, this is cake, you say?" "Yes. I've perfectly recreated the taste." "The taste is perfect? So everything else about it is awful?" Shion certainly seemed confident, and watching her only made more butterflies materialize in my stomach. Regretting my carelessness, I decided to take a single bite. You could predict the results. I scooped up just a bit with my spoon and brought it ever so slowly to my mouth. I thought I was going to immediately retch. It felt like jello, but the taste was all sugary sweet cake. It was grey in color, and the feel was decidedly gelatinous. It instantly reminded me how important the look of a cake was to the overall experience. Well, not just cake. With any kind of food, visuals are key. If you just tossed a bunch of ingredients on a plate, nobody would find that appetizing. What do you think? It's good, isn't it? She smirked at me. I know she wanted to say it's perfect, isn't it? But she just lacked the fundamentals. And by fundamentals, I meant she was tripping over the entire definition of what food is. Sit down. Sit down there, please. We need to talk. Huh? What's wrong? Shion's smirk melted into a pair of teary eyes. Her head was already tilted downward, but I didn't let that stop me. The ensuing lecture lasted a very earnest 30 minutes, as I explained to Shion what cooking was. She seemed remorseful, at least, and she promised that next time she'd discuss things with someone else and follow their advice. And so forth. After that lecture, I recalled that when Shion was practicing her tea service, Diablo was guiding her through it. He claimed that a mere taste test of her work upset his stomach, and such sacrifices on his part were what helped Shion grow so well. If I let her practice by herself, she'd never notice where she was going wrong. Leaving her to her own devices, then, was a mistake. No matter what the task was, Shion always relied on her innate special skills to get fast results. It's hard to grow that way. She needed someone overseeing her. Thus, there was no possible way I could name Shion as a counselor. If she caused any kind of problem in the council, it could shatter the relationship I'd taken all this effort to build with humankind. And if I wanted someone there to stop her if she flew off the handle, I had a pretty limited pool to pick from in this nation. If I did have someone like that, it'd be far more effective to just name them counselor. Like Diablo, maybe. I think Diablo could handle it pretty well. I kind of let my true feelings fall from my lips. Everyone in the meeting room nodded. Yes, Diablo would put us all at ease. It'd be easy for him to cajole those nobles into doing our bidding. And I doubt he'd ever back down against violence or take bribes. Rigurd, Benimaru, and Gable all deeply trusted Diablo. Shuna and Xion joined them. With his brains and cleverness, I'm sure he'd make things go your way, Sir Rimuru. I hate to admit it, but my undersecretary is a talented man. Besides, if he can get out of my hair and go to Inglesia for me, my job as first secretary will be more important than ever. I'm not sure you'd find anyone more qualified. They all seemed in agreement. Xion had less virtuous motives, perhaps, but there was no doubting her appreciation for his ability. Nobody voiced any objections, and there were no other brilliant proposals, so we settled on Diablo as being our top candidate. But I'm sure he'll hate it. You know, I get the feeling he's going to despise doing odd job work like that. That's why he's gone out to look for minions of his own, and for all I know, maybe he'll find someone good at negotiating for me. So for now, let's call Diablo the main candidate, subject to future changes. That seemed good for now. Of course, until we actually pick someone, it'd be me showing up for council meetings. I wanted someone else in there fast, so hopefully, I thought, Diablo would be kind enough to come back soon. This was an urgent issue, sure, but for the most part, it was my problem. Fortunately, after deciding to wait on Diablo, the conference ended without any other major hiccups. Nothing beats peace. It's a good thing, not having any problems, and it's even better to have free time to enjoy. So I decided to pay a visit to Kurobe. Why? Because thanks to having some more time on my hands, I had discovered something I wanted to talk about. I called for him upon entering his workshop. Kurobe, you got a moment? I waved at the nervous-looking apprentices as I went to the inner room. There, I found Kurobe observing a row of several swords. Ah, Sir Rimuru. Just who I wanted to see. There's something I wanted to report to you about, actually. Oh, to me? What's up? If he had something to report, it was likely some new work of his. He always gave form to my ideas, working with Kaijin to develop all kinds of things, so presumably he had created some other useful item for me, and I was right. Well, regarding the thing you asked about earlier, I think I have a complete version. Kurobe pointed at the swords in front of him, in all shapes and sizes. Judging by how happy he looked, I assumed they were pretty special. But what did he mean by what I'd asked about earlier? I blather on about all sorts of nonsense on the regular, so I couldn't recall exactly what he was referring to. But a quick assessment took care of that. Understood. This weapon is a broadsword, level, unique. Ooh, it is a unique. And if Kurobe crafted it, it's got to be quality. But I didn't think that'd be enough to make Kurobe act so self-assured around me like this. With his talents, he could forge several uniques a month. If he employed his usual methods, he could finish up a blade in one day. These averaged unique in quality, even if they were failures, they were still in the upper echelon of rares. If he was more thorough with his work, that took 2 or 3 days, but it pretty much always resulted in something unique or better, he was still far away from crafting a legend-class weapon, it seemed, but I really believed he'd do it someday. Plus, if you had a talented fighter wielding one of his blades, that alone could progress it up to legend, I thought. He chose all his materials carefully, using only the purest of magisteel. Weapons made from that took on the will of their owner to evolve further, so I really didn't think it was long before we'd see our first Kurobe forged legend-class blade. Thus, I assumed he wouldn't go this far out of his way to show off some more uniques, but I took a closer look at the broadsword. The most notable thing on it was the marble-sized depressions at its base, 3 of them. Otherwise, nothing stood out. It was a perfectly capable sword, of course, but I wouldn't say it stood out of the pack among Kurobe's creations. If one of his apprentices was behind it, that was another story. This might be a strange thing to say, but it was a completely normal unique. There was no special inscription magic applied to it, apparently. But hang on, now I saw something. What is this? It's an impressive unique but nothing too rare for you, is it? Hiding my excitement, I pretended not to spot it. Oh, did you forget? Heh. This is special, this is. It looks like a normal weapon at first glance, and no magic's been applied to it, but you won't believe what it features. At this point in time, not even my, Raphael's, analyze and assess skill could find any unusual effects to it. If it was what I thought it was, perhaps I should expect a lot. As I stood there, heart thumping, Kurobe took out a glowing ball, then casually installed it in the hilt. Just stick it in a hole like this, and then. Report. The weapon broadsword has transformed into the magical weapon broadsword. Aha. What was once a regular weapon was now a magical one. So that crazy idea of mine was finally in production? Whoa. You really completed it? Heh. So you have noticed, Soraimaru? That's right. This is the exact mechanism you described to me. Right. I did discuss this idea with him. I knew Kurobe was always working on his research, but I had no idea he wrapped this up so quickly. It almost scared me. He was a taciturn man, never one to brag about his achievements, but his work explained with perfect eloquence how great he was. Truly, a role model for all artisans. Wow. Kurobe. This is amazing. Seriously, this is the most amazing invention ever. I was now audibly excited. Kurobe gave me a satisfied smile and a strong nod. He. Wonderful. Now he was smirking. I had almost never seen a smirk look so natural on someone's face before. Shion's smirk mostly irritated me, but here, I just had to hand it to Kurobe. There were several ways to craft magic weapons. In my case, I could use Raphael's combine/disassemble skill to easily apply magic effects to just about anything. Kurobe could do something similar, but Kaijin and their apprentices didn't have the ability to cheat like that. What did they do, then? The most common way was to have an enchanter inscribe something on it. Dold knew how to do that, so he would come around to inscribe what this workshop finished. This completed the magic weapon, and then you just had to run some magic power into the inscription to trigger the designated spell. But you could only infuse a weapon with so many different spells, 2 was usually the limit, and once you inscribed a spell, there was no removing it. The other method, as I think I've mentioned a few times before, has to do with how the weapon evolves. Once it's exposed to the magic force of the user, weapons will often have certain extra powers applied to them. It's tough to aim for this, and it takes a lot of time, but sometimes a weapon gains unexpected force. This method was also the subject of ongoing research toward a way to streamline weapon evolution. By the way, I had donated part of the large cache of unique weapons we obtained at the Umrata ruins toward this research. I wasn't expecting it to lead to quick results, of course, but it's important we kept up a continual effort. So what had Kurobe just made? Oh, just something that rendered everything that came before it obsolete. I first brought up this idea while drinking with Kaijin and Kurobe. First, we'd take a sturdy magisteel weapon, perfect for the transmission of magic. Next, we'd create a set of magic-generating external plug-in cores. Then, I theorized, you could have a magic weapon that wasn't hardwired for just one spell or the other. For example, what if you placed a magical stone infused with elemental force in a sword? The answer was the blade before me. And it wasn't just some magic stone in there, it was a high-purity jewel. What do you think, Soraimaru? Just like you pictured it? So here's a sword with holes ready for magical expansions. And meanwhile, Kaijin succeeded in compressing magicules into these pure, refined magic crystals. Kurobe held his nose in the air. So Kaijin was part of this. Generally, it was Kurobe who forged the base weapon and Kaijin who put in the jewels and other final touches. It took the two of them working together to complete something as wonderful as this, I assumed. We call these element-infused magic stones element cores. We just call them cores around the workshop. Gable's been out capturing wyverns, So since Vesta had some free time, he helped with the research, too. Those two had been working on spirit cores, a kind of power reactor, right? So he said they already had a way to infuse magic stones with the 4 primary elements of earth, water, fire, and wind. I recalled Ramirez lecturing me about how it was key for a spirit core to generate all the elements at the once, or something. If Kaijin's team was working on that, making stones with just one element must have been simple by comparison. Beyond that, it was all about adjusting the core sizes and output levels, and there you had it, an element core composed of one of the 4 basic elements. These were, of course, disposable items. Once the magic inside it ran out, it was just another pretty jewel, but Kurobe told me that these could be reused if brought back here. So there's no way to recharge the energy inside? Oh, there is. But it requires an experienced magic user infusing their own force into the core, so it's not for laypersons. I see. Sounds like it could create some new jobs. Like workshops you could bring weapons to and have them charge up their magic for you. Yep. I think, on the field, you'll want to pack some spares with you. That could be a market of its own. True. I thought that maybe shops dealing in monster drops could mix in some magic core sales, but now I figured we could have entire dedicated stores for them. But you need to be careful. This is still in the experimental stage, but depending on the combinations you try, you may wind up changing the elements. Combinations? What did he mean? You can change elements. Wait. As you can see here, this sword has 3 places to insert jewels. I knew it. So if you insert 2 opposed elements into the same weapon, you'll wind up with some element you didn't expect. You got it. Kurobe nodded at my guess. That was big news. This definitely needed some more R&D, then, not the kind of thing we could put on the market that fast. Negative. All data used within the labyrinth can be collated and organized. Right. Yeah. That's true. It'd certainly save us some research time, so in terms of safety, the labyrinth would be ideal. In that case, maybe we ought to bring on a few labyrinth challengers and have them generate a bunch of on-the-field inspection data for us. Even if they made some amazing discovery that way, after all, the tech could still only be produced within Tempest. Maybe some of it would leak, but if we were gonna bring this to market, that'd happen sooner or later anyway. Better to have them test these weapons out in an easily controlled environment. By the way, what kind of dangers do you anticipate? Well, you can insert as many jewels as there are holes, so if there's just one hole, no problem there. But if you put in, say, a wind core and a fire one, that results in more force. Water and fire reduced the force, but water plus 2 fires caused the thing to explode on us. It wasn't just 3 times the force, more like several dozen times. So I was just talking with Kaijin about the need for more testing. Sounded like there was some pretty dangerous combos. More experimentation was needed, yes, and we'd need to test every result. Just as Raphael suggested, putting them in the hands of labyrinth explorers was our quickest bet. Is 3 holes the maximum? Yep. 3's the best we ever managed. In fact, a 3-holed weapon was apparently something they had around a 1 in 100 chance of forging, and that was with Kurobe's full effort. Thus, they still only had this one here. Their apprentices, meanwhile, were still way too green to craft anything like this. Only 4 of their most advanced students successfully forged weapons with 1 jewel slot. Even Kaijin only managed one with 2 holes, which tells you something about how tricky these are to make. Yeah, so this is the only successful 3-slot weapon we have so far. But with the right combination of cores, I think you could easily get legend-class force from it. Kurobe sounded proud. Magic swords are already valuable enough, but if one lets you change its element on the fly, that just blew away all common sense. Imagine a magic weapon you could flip a switch on, so to speak, and instantly strike at your enemy's weak element. It was amazing. I couldn't even guess at its value, but I don't think Kurobe was kidding when he hinted it was legend class, and with the right configuration, it really could be a legend-class force. From the bottom of my heart, I had to congratulate Kurobe and his team. It was astounding. Based on our discussions, we decided that core-compatible weapons should be sent to the labyrinth first. We'd also manufacture a large number of throwaway, non-rechargeable cores and toss them into the maze's treasure chests. And once Kurobe's apprentices could learn how to craft these weapons in bulk, I planned to make those into labyrinth boss drops ASAP. 3-slot weapons weren't gonna be easy to make, of course, but the way I heard it, those plans were doable as long as we didn't strive for top quality. If we cut the durability enough that the weapons drop down in class, that ought to be doable. You see any problems with that? Nah, I think we can make it work. They'd be pretty brittle, so I wouldn't want to rely on one in real battle, but Kurobe seemed a little reluctant, but his stuff still ought